Hello, happy Friday, and welcome to Sound Off with System One. I'm your host, Allie Moen. I'm the brand manager here at System One. Thank you all so much for joining us today on this beautiful Friday afternoon. As you're tuning in, please hop in the comments. Let us know where you're joining from, what industry you work in. And if you have any questions related to today's topic, drop them in there as well. We will be taking a look through those and getting to as many as we can to answer live today for you. So before we get started with today's topic, which is how to prepare for the toughest interview questions, I want to say a few words about System One, and then I'll give my experts a chance to introduce themselves. System One is a leading provider of highly specialized outsourced services and workforce solutions to critical infrastructure, technology, life sciences, and government sectors, putting more than 650 employees and 9,000 contractors to work every day. All right, and before we get started with today's topic, I'm going to let my experts introduce themselves, and John, we will start with you.
Hey everyone, happy Friday, good afternoon. My name is John Jansen. I'm a senior staffing coordinator here at System One. Worked here in the past and separated for a little bit, did some recruiting and career counseling, and now I'm so excited to be back. The job market's hot, and we're excited to be here. And just also want to roll right into a hot job that I'm working on. I'm working on a stationary engineer, maintenance mechanic in Cranbury, New Jersey. This is a contract role for about 2 months, but there's a strong possibility of going permanent there. It looks like someone is heading out on a leave of absence and potentially might retire. But it's a first shift opportunity, Monday through Friday. The pay rate's $30 to $38 an hour. The position will be supporting 3 farmer-type buildings under one portfolio. What makes the role stand out is it's a mechanically intensive role focused on keeping people comfortable, warm in the winter, cold in the summer. A lot of work with aging rooftop HVAC equipment. So you have to be good at troubleshooting, making repairs when replacement's not an option. Requirements here, candidates must have a high-pressure Black Seal license and be confident with boiler operations and HVAC diagnostics. So exciting opportunity.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sean Thibodeau, Senior Recruiter with Mountain Limited, a System One division. Mountain Limited is a pioneering telecommunication engineering firm which bridges the communication gaps and strengthens our nation's critical infrastructure. My hot job of the day is an outside plant engineer, of course, in the telecommunication industry in the Seattle, Washington area. This is a long-term W-2 contract position. The pay is very unique on this role. It's a mix of hourly and also production or unit-based. If you got experience doing field engineering, please reach out. We got an exciting opportunity right there in the Seattle market. Take your next step in your career.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Matos. I'm a senior recruiter with Jolay. I specialize in clinical research and healthcare recruitment. So for today, my hot job is a RNA lab lead. It's actually out here in Pittsburgh. It's with a new facility that's being built here. The company's actually located in the UK, which means that the training period would be 2 to 3 weeks in the UK. So if you love to travel, this would be the part to be part of. Now, the must-have for this is a PhD degree, of course, having the lead and management experience, and then also biotech experience. So if you are interested, definitely apply or reach out to me directly regarding the opportunity, because we do have multiple positions with the company itself.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing those hot jobs. Viewers, you can scan the QR code in the top of the screen, as well as see all of those job opportunities listed in the comments. You can search for those jobs and more by visiting our career portal at jobs.systemone.com. And without further ado, we will dive into today's topic, which is how to prepare for the toughest interview questions. So John, I'm going to come to you with my first question. If a candidate truly doesn't know the answer to a technical or situational question, what's the best way to handle it without hurting their chances?
Yeah, absolutely. Interviewing is tough, and I would say preparation is key. But when you're in this particular scenario where you're not sure how to answer a question, you're worried about hurting your chances, I would say the best way to go about it is to just own your answer with confidence. Let them know that you're not 100% sure, but maybe here's how you would go about finding that answer. I believe that shows honesty and problem solving. But maybe also a good piece of advice would be to lean into transferable thinking. So think of how the situation that they're asking you about might apply to something else that you have experience with that is very relative. It might be a way to just transfer over to a different scenario and provide a similar answer. I think that's good advice.
Yeah, definitely. That's great answers. I would add to that too, is just be real, be yourself, be honest, like John mentioned earlier, and definitely express your willingness to learn. A lot of hiring managers right now, especially in the telecom industry, are really looking for opportunities from candidates who want to go over and beyond and actually learn a new skill set that can add to their technical, aspect of the field.
Yeah, I mean, Sean and John had great points. Another thing too that very similar to what John mentioned is, something that's relatable, definitely relate it. If there's a system that they're looking for you to use and have experience with, and you may not have the experience, then to say, hey, I may not have this, but I do have something that's very similar, and then list all these similar systems. And some of them are very easy to, pick it up pretty quickly that they're okay with, as long as it's relatable. So anything you do have, definitely, mention it. Don't say no right away. Just say, hey, again, I may not have it, but I have all these other skills for it.
Definitely all great advice. Honesty is definitely key. And I like your point in tying your experience to a specific skill set or technology that the role or the hiring manager is asking for in the interview. And just being able to show that while you might not have that exact experience, this is what you do have, and show the willingness to learn, that you are open and willing to learn the technology or skill that they are asking for. So next question, Sean, will come to you to start. What are some of the toughest interview questions candidates struggle with most, and why?
Oh, that's a great question. A lot of time I try to partner up with all my candidates that are interviewing, try to do that interview prep. And one of the biggest things I found over the years is people having the ability to actually talk about yourself. It's an open-ended question. You kind of struggle. You don't want to give too much. You don't want to tell not enough. So that's always kind of that limbo land that you're in, that you really don't know exactly how much you want to give. And the other one would be, of course, what's your biggest weakness? Nobody wants to expose any flaws we have. So you definitely want to make it positive in both ends. But tell me about yourself. Think about it. It's in a quick elevator pitch that you can use to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know another one too is, why are you looking to leave your company? A lot of times people tend to really not sure what to say. Like, can I be positive or should I be honest with it? Definitely, yes, be honest to a certain point, but also be positive about why you're looking to leave your current company. A lot of times I've been noticing that people are looking to relocate. So if you are looking to relocate, explain to the people, hey, yes, I'm looking to move to the certain area, and then explain why. Have you done your research and how much research you are doing and how serious it is about this move? It's if you have family or friends, or this is your hometown and you're looking to come back, definitely elaborate on that. They want to know, again, you are serious about this move, and that's something you're looking to do. But again, for the looking to leave your current job, just be honest and be positive. Never be negative about your current company or any previous companies to begin with.
Wow, great advice. And I think that, these are definitely some of the toughest scenarios that interviewees will come across. Lately, maybe over the past 10 or 15 years, I've been super focused on behavioral-based interviewing. If you're new to this concept, I would definitely advise Googling what a behavioral-based interview is, and maybe what are the top questions you might be asked in that scenario and kind of how to answer them. But they're basically just open-ended questions. Rather than asking you directly about your weakness, they might ask you, tell me about a time when you experienced such and such, and tell me how you got through that. These are especially tough if a candidate hasn't practiced, in advance, particularly around being this has been here for about 10 or 15 years now. Recruiters and the like have thought of ways to sort of attack this scenario and have developed what's called the STAR format. Just a way to answer any behavioral-based question, would be to think back to, 6 to 8 experiences that you have that are robust experiences that you can talk about, good stories that you can tell, and sort of frame your answer back to the hiring manager in the format of a STAR acronym. What was the situation you were faced with? What task did you complete to get the thing done? What actions did you take to get it done? And ultimately, what was the result? of that scenario. So just to summarize, if you just take 6 to 8 experiences that you've been through in your work experience or in life, and come up with, those kind of robust stories that you can tell that point to your characteristics and your work habits and how you get things done. If you form that story into the STAR method, this is a perfect way to answer behavioral-based questions. So again, it's situation, task, action, result.
Awesome. Thank you all. Those are all great questions to share for our audience that can be really tough to answer. And we do have a lot of resources from System 1. So some past sound off segments, as well as some blogs that do actually touch on how to answer some of these questions. I know we have how to answer the biggest weakness in an interview. So we will be sure to drop some of those links in the comments, either during this segment or right after. So keep an eye out for those, but great advice from you all. I do see some questions rolling in. I do see a couple industry-specific questions. I know we have one from the nuclear industry. We do have a nuclear team here at System 1, so we will be sure to connect you with the correct people that will be able to better answer your questions for that. But if anyone else has any questions related to some other, maybe more general, tough interview questions, please drop those in. We would love to get to them live. But moving on to my third question, Kat, we'll start with you. What do hiring managers really want to hear when they ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really comes down to your career growth and where you see yourself overall. I think it's also too, they want to see if you're ambitious, but also realistic. So in the sense of you're like, okay, in 5 years, I want to be the CEO for an entry level job that you're applying to. That may not be the case. You're not going to be in 5 years, be in charge of the company. But if they see that, hey, you're looking to still continue to grow and that it takes time to really grow within the company, that's what they're looking for, to see that, again, you have a drive and you're passionate about what you're currently doing and what you're looking to do moving forward. Another thing, too, is that looking about the company, again, it's having that research. And when you're going for an interview, you have to research about the company. So knowing that if this is something you want to do, tell them like, hey, I read up on the company, I did my research, and I see myself being here with you guys and, going down this path. That's what they love to hear, especially on the interviews. Like I said, just your drive and your passion at being part of the team.
Yeah, great point, Kat. And I'll just piggyback off that to say that, in line with your point, the managers appreciate someone who's invested. So if you're being asked this question, particularly in relation to the job, the managers love to hear, I want to be somebody that this company can count on for the long haul. So, within your 5-year plan, it's great to point to things that you're doing in your own life and things like that. But particularly in relation to the job, you would want to answer the question in line with that. So great point, Kat.
Yeah, definitely. Both great answers. Just a little caveat on it. What really be is I'm finding that my hiring managers, they're really looking for commitment. They want to know that they're taking the time, especially if you're learning a new skill set, if you're looking at learning something new within the industry. They want to know that you're committed being with the company for long term. I know that 95% of the jobs I work are all open-ended W-2 contract positions. So we do take a lot of time making sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and the experience is well received on both ends, the candidate and the employer. And the big thing is just making sure that commitment is there so that way they can have you for long term, which will give you more opportunity for growth, which was mentioned.
That's great advice for that question. So be able to talk about yourself and what you want, but do make sure you talk about your future, your commitment, your investment in this company if you do get this role. That is very important. Something that all three of our experts just touched on there. So great advice. Next question, we will start with John. Are there any tough questions that job seekers overthink? And if so, what's the better way to approach them?
Yeah, I think one of the questions I deal with all the time is around salary expectations. So particularly when you've already applied for a job and you're in on the interview, if one of the first questions or any question during that time is related to salary expectations, I think a lot of people will panic, especially in the first round interview or something like that. If an HR person that you're interviewing with first is trying to figure out where exactly you stand on salary, one of the tactics that I provide to people I work with is just, show your value first. It's much important to come in there and find out about the job and offer, your experience and your value there. So if they approach you with this question, I would try to put it off until the offer stage of the interview process. If they're pressuring you to give an answer at that moment, I would just give them a very respectful response. Be like, I'm super excited about this position, and maybe there's a couple of things that got you excited about it. I would definitely let them know that at the time, and then maybe just give them a quick notion about why you think you're a fit for the role. And so say, if this happens to work out and you're interested in me and I'm interested in working here, then if an offer is made, I'm absolutely open to talking about salary at that moment. And so if they continue to pressure you here, you can just stand your ground and say, if you guys, again, just kind of reiterate that. And if you get to the offer stage, you would definitely be open to discussing salary expectations. Just try to put that off until where it's appropriate in the process. You may find that it comes early or it might come at the appropriate time, but just be prepared for it. If it does come up, you sort of want to push that off to the offer stage is probably the best approach.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great answer. One of the things I guess I've been dealing with here in the last couple of months frequently have been, why are you leaving your current role? And it's one of those questions that every candidate's always looking for a new job, new opportunity. But when the question's asked, when I'm sitting there during the interview process, they get stumbled. It's all right to be honest. You want to stay positive. You're looking for upward mobility. You're looking to take your career to the next step. You want to grow your career. Nobody wants to stay in the same line or position forever. So you definitely want to be honest and tell them why you're seeking. You feel like you offer more to a company based on all your experiences. The big catch on that is stay positive. Never talk bad about any previous companies, and don't be negative. But don't overthink it. Just take a deep breath and relax and go with the flow.
Yeah, you guys have some great points. My biggest thing I've at least been noticing as a recruiter is when you ask that question, tell you about yourself. And I know Sean brought it up earlier. That is the biggest thing. And I use that question all the time when I'm talking to candidates, what is going on in your life. Like I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And sometimes, on the phone, especially with the interview too, you may only have 30 minutes and you want to go and be able to elaborate on your skills. So that type of question should only take about 5 to 8 minutes, and it should really be based on the opportunity that you're applying to. So any type of skills that are relatable, definitely bring it up. Don't go into, taking up much of the time of 20 minutes or 15 minutes of explaining, and then you don't have much much questions to ask later on, or they don't have enough time to even ask you questions. You're able to put out more of your skills that you have, you're offered. So definitely take that time. And I always do it for myself too. Like in the past, when I was interviewing, I talk to myself, I'm sitting in the mirror and I'm telling myself timing myself 5 minutes and telling like, hey, tell me about yourself. So I go into talking to myself in the mirror about it and seeing if I'm actually doing it in the 5 minutes. And if I am, that's fantastic. I'm doing practice. But if you are going over, then definitely, shorten it down and making sure that is relatable, except to the job that you are applying to.
Great advice. And Kat, I love you mentioned kind of talking to yourself in the mirror. When I've been in interview situations, that's how I would prepare as well. Just stand, talk in the mirror, work on making sure my hand gestures aren't too crazy as well, but also watching my time with some of the answers that I'm practicing with questions for. So great advice. We do have a viewer question that I'd like to pull up for our experts. So let's see here. What are the best questions that we can ask back to the interviewer?
Yeah, I can take that one. The best questions, and I think it really comes down to the job itself. With me being in clinical research, there's a lot that goes into it. So the pipeline or the product that they have that's going on with the current company, what does that consist of? How many clinical trials are happening? How many of them are in phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3? So being a little bit more detailed, that could help in wanting to know what's going on, because they may have some information on their website, but they may not have everything. So if you wanted to go more detail about that and what you're working on, then I would say elaborate on those type of questions. Same thing with healthcare, depending on what you're doing and how many patients you're looking to see, and what the daily, I guess, or weekly commitments are for you. Again, that's something, like I said, you want to go in more detail about, because I know that would be really more important to anyone than anything else.
John, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry about that. I think one thing I've held in my back pocket, my entire time in my professional interviews and advice that I've given to others is to maybe position, if you're going in there as a job seeker, of course, you're worried about the salary and what are the hours and what's the job entail. These are all basic components and you can ask those questions. But I think a more strategic and intelligent question is to ask them, what are the biggest challenges that the person will face in this role or that the company needs resolved within the first 30, 60 to 90 days. I think that giving insight into that is showing that you are ready to attack and you're ready to resolve and you're in it on the roll rather than wondering if this is going to logistically work out for you as far as pay or whatnot. So I just think it sets you apart from other candidates. You're already digging into like, what are going to be the things that I can help resolve here and finding out what those are to not only assess whether or not you're the right fit for the role for yourself, but also, being able to offer that value back to the hiring manager to show them what you got.
Yeah, definitely. Challenges that the company's facing is a great one. I like to see people ask, what is the company's culture? How does the company operate? What are they forecasting? What are they looking for in changes in the future? Things of that nature. You can get really specific if you want on the industry that you're actually, want to ask a detailed question for. But you're trying to just get a vibe of, the person that's interviewing you, how they're reacting, because, they are looking at you on facial expression. So sometimes they're caught off guard, not prepared to answer a question. So it can be as big, as hard as a question you want, or as simple. But a lot of times candidates do not ask a question. And I think a simple question of maybe recapping the position or what they're looking for in the best candidate to fill the role actually is a great little question to ask.
Yeah. And another thing too, and we mentioned about your 5-year career plan, you can ask them, hey, what's my career path within the company? What does that look like for me and my future there? So you always can go back with that type of question. And like I said, they want to see that, oh, wow, this person really is showing an interest and they want to grow with the company. They want to know what is my career plan as well too. So again, that's a good question to ask, which is sometimes I tend to use as well.
Awesome. All great advice. So I'll move on to my next question. I think I see a couple more questions rolling in. So let me take a look at those while our experts are answering my next question here. Oh goodness, I'm sorry. Sean, we're going to come to you. In your opinion, what's the biggest difference between candidates who crush tough interviews and those who don't?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the candidates that crush the tough interviews work with a System 1 recruiter. I think all the System 1 recruiters really take the time to see what the candidate's looking for. We work hand in hand with employers, so we're setting them up for success because we're doing that interview prep. Candidate preparation is probably the biggest key. It's been mentioned before, talking in front of a mirror, looking, asking questions, ideally, research the company that you're interviewing for. No kidding, really research it, because sometimes I have candidates that don't know everything about a company. So I definitely want to take an opportunity to explain more depth what the company is. But that's an individual's, they need to make sure they want to be invested in that interview. So they want to take the time to research the company. You also want to know exactly what the job is you're interviewing for. Working with a recruiter with System 1 sets you apart because your resume didn't just go to a job board or to an inbox. So you get the time to, kind of digest, read into it and make sure you're prepared. And I think that's the biggest thing is actually just taking the time, researching the position, the company, and working with a recruiter.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that sets, those apart who crush interviews, I just believe that top performers, and this really comes with experience. Once you've been out there and you've been in the professional world for a while and you've been on many, many interviews, you'll begin to realize that it really is just a two-way conversation. And I totally understand the hesitancy from a job seeker who has a lot on the line. Maybe this is their only option when they're getting in there. So, there's a lot at risk for them, and for the company, they have many candidates. So it's not the same scenario. So I get the pressure, but the better you can get, the more prepared you are for interviews, the more you practice this. I mean, sometimes when I went on like really difficult interviews or ones that I wanted, wholeheartedly. I would go and get interviews like at a Target store just to start practicing, just to try things with that interviewer to see if I could be aggressive in a certain way. And if it didn't work out there, I didn't mind, but I learned a lesson there. And so I would try to get better at having a stronger backbone, thicker skin myself, to really treat it like a two-way conversation, so that when I get in there and they're telling me about the job and asking me questions, they're interviewing me. And as soon as they ask me if I have any questions, I'm interviewing them. And I think top performers will get to that place. They'll realize that the conversation is really key.
Yeah, great point. I know John mentioned earlier about behavioral question. I know that's probably the biggest thing. Sometimes even I struggle with it too. And what I tend to do, as I mentioned, even with tell me yourself, is talk to myself in the mirror. You can do the exactly same thing with behavioral question. Figure out what story you would like to use, and having those examples, as John mentioned, having that 6 or 8, what the situation was, and then tell about your story and then the results that came to it. Again, for these type of questions or behavioral questions, you don't want to run on the story. They want to know exactly what happened and how you resolved it and what the results went to. If they're still using that same strategy that you came up with, or what was happening afterwards. Anything like that, they want to know exactly what your input was. But that should take about, again, 5 to 8 minutes of elaborating on your story and said what came from it. So definitely don't ramble. That's the biggest thing. Providing some context to it and highlighting the role itself that you played into it. And if it's something that's relatable to the job you're applying to, then yes, definitely use that. That would definitely help in your situation to highlight your skill, your background, and how confident you were to handle something. So that would be the biggest thing. But again, as John mentioned before, going on Google, searching it, or going on our website and seeing, behavioral questions and some tips that we can help you with.
Absolutely. And I'll interject real quick just to say, sometimes in those scenarios with behavioral based questions, you're trying to go from a situation and what you did and ultimately what was the result. But let's be honest, what if the result was not good? What do you do then? I think the best way to handle that is to just describe a situation where you learned a lesson and did it differently, maybe the next time you face that situation. So just to kind of wrap that up, if you have to mention a negative, I think it shows a lot of confidence that you can talk about something that maybe wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, but definitely what you learned from that and what you changed about your process could definitely turn a negative into a positive in a real way.
Great advice. Yeah, I think my key takeaways from you all talking through this question is definitely to prepare, practice those tough interview questions, know what the company that you're interviewing with does, really digest and understand the job description too for the role that you're applying for. Just make sure you practice those with yourself, with family, friends, with the recruiter that you might be working with. That's the best way that you'll be able to crush all of the tough interview questions that might come your way. So we are going to take another viewer question here, and this one will be fun. So Owen wants to know from you all, what is the toughest interview question that you all were personally asked in an interview?
I can start off. I got 2 questions. The first one hopefully doesn't get me fired with System 1. Many years ago, when I retired from the Army, I got a phone call from Mountain Limited, and they asked me to be a recruiter. And I laughed because I said, a recruiter? They lied to me for 25 years while I was in the Army, so there's no way I want to be a recruiter. Needless to say, it gave me a great opportunity to kind of jump through that hurdle on the question, and knowing that I could make a difference, kind of like what my last career path was, which was totally different than recruiting, but was actually being able to take care of people and to allow them to have success in their careers. So I love that. But for me personally, the toughest question is, what is your strongest asset or your weakest moment or weakest point that you might have? And for me, it's overworking. That's a great thing to have. It's very positive, but it's also negative because it's easy to get focused so much entrapped in doing your work that it's a plus and a minus, really. Kind of not being able to balance work-life balance. Sometimes it can be a weakness and sometimes it can be a strength. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's so many things to talk about, and I can't recall a specific question. I mean, I guess it was context dependent, and maybe they wanted to know about my particular experience, and I was wondering if, the value of my experience was what they're looking for, and I'm trying to come up with that. right in the spot. Maybe that was the toughest time I've had. And now I'm losing my point, but I was just going to talk about just the amount of preparation I've learned over time about, thinking that I have all of my ducks in a row and being like, I could shoot from the hip when I go in this interview. I know what I'm about and I know what this job's about. I'll do just fine. And that's pretty much the biggest lesson. Over 10 years of trying to do that, I've really been convinced that preparation is key. And so even when I talk to candidates, I'm like, if someone's soliciting my advice or what should I do about an interview that I have tomorrow, I have to let them know, there's nothing you can do about the past, but, you're going to have to come up with a way to like prepare yourself as best as you possibly can, whether it's in the mirror or working with others or recording yourself or doing all those things. Like try to go through some of those motions because you're going to have to sit with yourself tomorrow and shoot from the hip. So, you should always be preparing for interviews. And if you're out there, like test yourself every now and then and go out, if you're going out to career fairs, like talk to people, use that idea where maybe I'll talk to others who are in a position to hire me that I don't have a concern to work for, and just try to bounce those ideas off them and just get more prepared as you move forward. So apologies, I can't come up with the actual question, but I think for me, it's the preparedness over, my full experience of interviewing that I've realized is the number one key. You have to prepare. There are no shorts that you could have been with full preparedness.
Yeah, both great questions or, answers to it. But at least for me, I think it was having some type of situation or have you handled a situation with either a coworker or with a manager. Sometimes I get stuck on that. That's more of a behavioral question. And I always have to try to come up with examples of me being part of that. And okay, how did I handle that? A lot of times I tend to be positive. Initially, yes, you want to give feedback and you want to be positive about it. And how did you go about it to give the feedback? And that's what they want to know. How did you do that? How do they receive the feedback? So that is something that I try to, I guess with even now too, like I try to give feedback positive and negative. And it's always good to give people feedback, even positive too. If the manager is doing fantastic, then let them know that, hey, you guys are doing great. If there's something that is bothering you, concerning, then have that conversation with them. But for a situation, that's where I had to go in and tell the managers who I'm interviewing with that, hey, yes, I've been part of a situation with a manager that where I had to give feedback in real time, and I was able to pull them to a side and have that. But again, you want to turn that type of question that's tough into something to positive, and how was it resolved and moving forward, and just something with, like I said, behavioral question that always gets me, but that one particularly does.
Yep, thank you for that viewer question. All of our viewers, I know we are running longer than our typical Sound Off with System 1 segments, but I have 2 more questions for my experts here. So any questions that you drop in the comments, we will respond to you after the show. But experts, let's move on to question number 6. Kat, are there any unexpected tough questions that candidates should prepare for but often don't?
The biggest thing is not preparing about the company that you're applying to. Even talking to candidates, and I know sometimes they may not know exactly who even Jolay is or System 1. And sometimes people know and they do their research and they're like, hey, like, are you guys a staffing company? At least I know they did some type of research that even they're coming back and asking some questions about the company overall. But even when you're on the interview, the interviewer wants to know exactly what you learn about the company, your research, their mission, their products, their service, whatever it may be. They want to know that you have done your research and you're positive about the company. And a lot of times when people don't and they go in there, yeah, I did some research and did this, it just shows that you're not really passionate about the company and about this job overall, and they may not move forward, even though you may have the right qualifications for it. But that is the biggest thing to do, is research and preparing.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I took it down a little bit of a notch on this one. What I've found in the past is sometimes I get hiring managers that'll just ask the simple question of, tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume. They want to see the kind of culturals you have. What are you doing on your free time? And it's not a trick question. It's just they want to kind of get that personal side of you. We all use a resume. We all use our LinkedIn profile. Sometimes those things don't have the hidden gems that you might offer for a company. You might not think being a volunteer coach or mentoring others is a big deal, but depending on the position you're working in, that might be a key to success. So that's why clients will ask that, hiring managers. But I find sometimes people are a little stumped on, they're not sure how to answer that. You don't want to lie. You want to keep it brief. You want to keep it honest. But you definitely, everybody has a skill set that's not labeled, or, skills that you have that's not on your resume that you can share, kind of what you enjoy in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. For me, anything that you can anticipate about your own background that may be very obvious to an interviewer to ask you about, i.e., if there's a major gap between one time you had a job and the next job that you had. I mean, it's just common sense that they would wonder, well, what were you up to during that time? So that's there. So just work on your answer as part of preparedness. Make sure that you have a solid answer, and crowdsource it among your family and see how they feel, or talk to your closest professional who's in a position to hire, see how they feel. But like one of those aspects, and maybe you have, nothing but positive things to say about your past employer, but let's be honest, more often than not, some people are in a scenario where their last opportunity didn't go well. So they might ask you, what would your last manager say about you? So anticipate that question might come up, and try to find ways in which you can talk positively about that. So you're not caught off guard, and just, if the truth is negative, it may be the truth, and that's great, but you're sort of leaving the door open for them to interpret that and decide whether or not they want to hire you based on this. So the more you can make everything positive, the more it's just easy to understand, what your strengths were, and what your manager might say in a positive light, and maybe just don't shed light on the negative for the time being during that question. If that makes sense.
It does. All great advice. And my last question for our experts, John, if you could start us off here. How can someone stay calm and confident when they get caught off guard by a tough question?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give here is learn how to live in the silence. So if they ask you a question, it's a very tough thing to do, especially if you have nerves. Any silence, I'm introverted, so I understand, can be very, very high pressure. So maybe a good piece of advice would just be to come up with some sort of filler phrase, so that once they deliver the question to you, you have something to respond with that buys you a few seconds while you're trying to gather your thoughts. So one piece of advice would be saying, that's a great question. Let me think about the best example I can share, as you sort of begin to share that answer. So it buys you, even those 3 seconds, having that silence can be a lot of pressure. So having a filler phrase, I think, is a good piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. I would add, don't fake it. I've seen it before. People are in the interview and all of a sudden they're pulling something out. Like John mentioned, just take a moment, take that deep breath, kind of relax, be honest, own the moment, be real, and answer the question the best you can.
Yeah, I will third that. I mean, you guys made great points, and it is really the confidence. It is really being honest and taking that moment just to take a deep breath, figure out what you want to say. And like I said, what John mentioned, if you want to say, hey, can I clarify that, or this, some type of phrase, you definitely can say that. I think when you go in and I just said, don't do that. But, it just, again, having that moment just to be confident in owning what you want to say. And they love that. They want to hear that you are being positive and you're being honest about the job. And, they never want to hear of someone going on the interview and lying about their skills or their experience, or they may not have the right experience and saying, yeah, I've done this before. And then you end up getting hired and you don't have the right experience. And then they're like, wait, what just happened? So you want to go in there, again, just being positive and confident.
Great advice from all of you. So thank you so much for hopping on Sound Off with System 1 today. Love having you all on, John, Sean, and Kat. Make sure you give all of our experts today a follow on LinkedIn, connect with them, follow System 1 on LinkedIn as well, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of great content on there, success stories, leadership insights, all of our past Sound Off with System 1 segments as well. We are here live every first and third Friday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. Our next Sound Off will be on May 16th, and we will be having a live Q&A. So join us, drop your questions, and our experts will answer them live. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.